Imagine a time when entire civilizations rise and fall, where swords clash, and empires expand through the conquest of the most coveted territories. In the heart of West Africa, one empire, rich in gold and culture, resisted European colonization for over half a century. This was the Ashanti Empire, a fierce and proud kingdom that stood toe-to-toe with the British Empire in a series of wars known as the Anglo-Ashanti Wars. Spanning from 1824 to 1900, these wars were battles not only for control of land and resources, but also for identity, sovereignty, and survival. Today, we journey back to the first two of these epic conflicts, where the Ashanti Empire, with its disciplined armies and ingenious strategies, fought tooth and nail against the British colonial machine. These wars were not just battles of steel and gunpowder. They were clashes of cultures, ideologies, and the indomitable human spirit. Before the first gunshots were fired in the Anglo-Ashanti conflicts, the Ashanti Empire had already established itself as one of West Africa's most powerful and wealthy states. Founded in the late 17th century by King Osei, the Ashanti expanded rapidly, consolidating smaller states under the leadership of a central authority. Their capital, Kumasi, became a thriving hub of culture, trade, and politics, a strategic center for gold trade. Under Osei Tutu's leadership, the Ashanti developed a sophisticated political structure and military system, allowing them to defend against neighboring threats while simultaneously expanding their influence. They also created strategic alliances, strengthening their dominance over trade routes and neighboring territories. The Ashanti's greatest asset was their golden stool, an object of immense spiritual significance, representing the unity and sovereignty of the Ashanti people. By the early 19th century, the Ashantis were not only wealthy from their gold, but also formidable in military prowess. They had a disciplined standing army, with both elite warriors and regular soldiers, supported by an extensive network of military fortifications. The structure of the Ashanti army consisted of 6 main divisions: Scouts, Akwansrafor; Advance Guard, Twafor; Main Body, Adontan; Rear Guard, Kidom; 2 wings, Left, Benkum; and Right, Nifa, with each wing further divided into 2 formations: Right and Right Half, Nifa Nasi; Left and Left Half, Benkum Nanasi; and Personal Bodyguard, Nyasi. The army employed a flexible formation in battle with the Advance Guard, Main Body, Rear Guard, and right and left wings moving in unison. This structure allowed Asante generals to maneuver their forces effectively. The Scouts, comprised of skilled professional hunters, played a crucial role in reconnaissance and pursuit, using their marksmanship to target enemy forces once detected. The Gyasi division was left behind to protect the city, while the other divisions went to the battlefield. As the days passed, the Ashanti Empire stretched across vast swathes of West Africa, extending deep into Ivory Coast. Its influence felt far and wide. But as the empire grew, so too did the ambitions of foreign powers. The British, with their eyes set on the Gold Coast's riches, would soon come knocking at the Ashanti's door. As the British Empire expanded across the globe, the Gold Coast, with its vast resources of gold, palm oil, and strategic trade routes, became an area of immense interest. By the early 19th century, the British had established forts along the coast, including Fort Williams, Fort Cape Coast, and Fort James, from where they sought to control trade and establish dominance in the region. The British quickly managed to subdue the coastal towns, turning them into a British protectorate. This move was driven not only by their desire to control the region's resources, but also by a growing fear of the Ashanti Empire's power and influence. The Ashanti, with their formidable armies and centralized authority, posed a significant threat to British ambitions. By securing the coast, the British hoped to create a buffer zone, shielding their interests from Ashanti incursions while consolidating their hold on the region's lucrative trade networks. At first, the Ashanti and the British maintained a relatively peaceful relationship. Trade flourished, with the Ashanti exporting gold, ivory, and slaves in exchange for European goods like firearms, textiles, and alcohol. However, as British influence in the region grew, tensions began to rise. The Ashanti were wary of British attempts to dominate the region's lucrative resources. The Ashanti, who valued their independence, resisted the idea of British control over their resources. The British, in turn, began pressuring the Ashanti to comply with their demands, including paying tribute in exchange for recognition of their sovereignty. When the Ashanti king, King Osei Bonsu, refused to submit to British demands, it became clear that war was inevitable. To fully grasp the origins of the Anglo-Ashanti Wars, it is essential to examine earlier conflicts between the Ashanti and the British in the Gold Coast. These clashes set the stage for the larger wars to come. The first of these was the Ashanti War, 1806 to 1807, where the British refused to hand over two rebels sought by the Ashanti, eventually surrendering only one. This refusal strained relations between the two powers. Next came the Ga-Fante War, 1811, in which the Ashanti supported their Gai allies against the Fante and their British partners. Though the Ashanti won initial battles, they were pushed back by Fante guerrilla tactics. During this conflict, the Ashanti captured the British fort at Tantamqueri, showcasing their military prowess. Finally, the Ashanti Akwapim War, 1814 to 1816, saw the Ashanti defeat the Akim-Akwapim alliance, forcing British, Dutch, and Danish authorities to negotiate. In 1817, a British mission visited the Ashanti capital of Kumasi. This mission resulted in the signing of a treaty between the British and the Ashanti, declared to bring perpetual peace and harmony between the two powers. This treaty was supposed to resolve any disagreements. Despite this, a major disagreement still loomed. The Ashanti claimed to be the overlords of the entire Gold Coast. They demanded that the British pay rent for the forts they occupied along the coast. The British refused, and tensions between the two powers began to rise again. On 28 February, 1820, another British mission arrived in Kumasi, led by Joseph Dupuy, aiming to resolve the outstanding disagreements. The treaty he signed, however, was denounced by many as a complete sellout. It recognized Ashanti's authority over the coastal regions, acknowledged Ashanti's claims to collect tribute from coastal peoples, and even renounced the British responsibility to protect these peoples from Ashanti raids. Furthermore, the treaty recognized the right of the Asantehene, king of Ashanti, to eradicate from his dominions the seeds of disobedience and insubordination. When British Governor John Hope Smith learned of the treaty in April 1820, he repudiated it, which caused considerable outrage in Kumasi. The Ashanti, feeling deceived, accused the British of bad faith. All these years, the Gold Coast was incorporated into the Crown Colony of Sierra Leone, which was the central governing body of the British in Africa. This implied the seat of government was situated in Sierra Leone, while the African Company of Merchants managed the affairs of the British government locally. However, on the 7th of May, 1821, an Act of Parliament was enacted in London that redefined the Gold Coast's status from a proprietary colony governed by the African Company of Merchants to a crown colony directly managed by the British government. On 28 March 1822, Brigadier General Sir Charles McCarthy arrived at Cape Coast Castle as the new governor, tasked with closing some of the more indefensible coastal forts, ensuring the remaining forts complied with the law by trading only with British ships, and eliminating the still thriving slave trade. New to the Gold Coast, McCarthy found himself isolated due to the merchants' refusal to collaborate with someone sent to replace their authority, leaving him unaware of the local affairs. During his governance, McCarthy focused more on persuading the British government to purchase the remaining Dutch and Danish forts on the Gold Coast, and on curbing the traders' dealings with American ships than on fostering relations with the Ashanti. The immediate trigger for the war occurred when a group of Ashantis abducted and killed an African serviceman from the Royal African Corps on the 1st of February, 1823. Although this attack was not sanctioned by the King of Ashanti, as it stemmed from a disagreement between the sergeant and some Ashanti traders. Sergeant Kujo Otedefor of the Royal African Colonial Corps and his troops in Anamabu seized a large shipment of gold belonging to Ashanti traders and got embroiled in a verbal altercation with the traders, during which the sergeant grossly abused the King of Ashanti. Otedefor provoked the Ashantis by mentioning Cormentine and Saturday, alluding to the Battle of Cormentine in 1731, where an Ashanti king was killed, an embarrassing defeat that was so shameful it became a capital offense to speak of the battle within their kingdom. Otedefor was taken captive by an Ashanti war party a few weeks later and was executed on the 2nd of February, 1823. Enraged by the death of the sergeant, McCarthy dispatched a small British contingent into Ashanti territory. These troops were annihilated and forced to retreat by the Ashanti scouts. Even though the force he dispatched inland had been completely destroyed, McCarthy reported the encounter to London as a success and requested permission to lay a full-scale attack on Ashanti. McCarthy requested and obtained authorization to redeploy the Royal African Corps from the Cape Colony, present-day southwestern South Africa, to the Gold Coast. The Royal African Corps, consisting of 6 companies of European soldiers and 3 companies of African soldiers, served as a disciplinary corps within the British Army, intended to punish soldiers of bad character who had been convicted of crimes. Although the Royal African Corps was not considered a top-quality unit, it was the sole British military unit available for operations in Africa. McCarthy commanded an invasion from Cape Coast in 2 separate columns. Opposing them was an Ashanti force of 10,000 men equipped with Long Dane muskets. The Ashanti troops were notably disciplined. They moved in perfect formation. Their guns held at precisely the same angle before they faced the enemy and fired volleys on command, the only African army known to do so. Generally, the Ashanti did not possess standard ammunition for their Long Dane muskets, and instead used nails, which turned out to be a surprisingly effective alternative. Upon realizing the Ashanti army was on the advance, McCarthy made the unfortunate decision to split his forces. He failed to grasp until it was too late that the Ashanti force he encountered was the main army instead of merely an advance guard, as he had presumed. The governor was in the first contingent of 500, which lost contact with the other column when they confronted the Ashanti army, about 10,000 strong, on January 22, 1824, during the Battle of Nsamankow. The British ran low on ammunition, faced heavy casualties, and were overwhelmed. Almost the entire British force was killed immediately, with only 20 managing to escape. McCarthy, Ensign Wetherell, and his secretary Williams attempted to retreat. McCarthy was struck by gunfire, and then killed by a subsequent shot shortly after. Ensign Wetherell met his end while trying to protect McCarthy's body. Williams was captured but spared execution when an Ashanti sub-chief recognized him because of a kindness he had shown previously. Williams was held captive for several months in a hut that also contained the headless bodies of McCarthy and Wetherell. During his captivity, he was housed in a thatched shelter adjacent to the preserved heads, which had maintained their condition due to a unique preservation method. McCarthy's skull, adorned with a gold rim, was kept as a war trophy and utilized as a drinking vessel by the rulers of the Ashanti. Weeks later, a larger British contingent, composed of both European and native soldiers, faced off against the same Ashanti forces that had defeated McCarthy's troops. Ultimately, the British army retreated to the coast, suffering 176 fatalities and 677 injuries. Major Alexander Gordon Laing returned to Britain with reports of this defeat. The Ashanti forces advanced toward the coast, but disease compelled them to retreat. In 1826, John Hope Smith became the new governor of the Gold Coast. He was well regarded by the Fante people and even married a Fante woman. Smith favored the coastal people of Cape Coast and built a strong alliance with them. In August 1826, the governor received intelligence regarding an impending Ashanti assault on Accra. He began assembling a fresh army largely consisting of local natives, including Denkiras and other traditional adversaries of the Ashanti. A defensive position was established on the open plain approximately 15 kilometers, 10 miles north of Accra, where 11,000 troops awaited. On August 7th, the Ashanti attacked Smith's strongest unit, the Royal Marines, but were unprepared for a counterattack from both sides. The Ashanti force appeared to be prevailing in the center, but they were struggling on their flanks as the battle devolved into hand-to-hand combat. The missiles were then launched. The Ashanti fell back due to the new weapons, explosions, rocket trails, and severe injuries from flying metal fragments. They quickly left the field with thousands of casualties. In 1831, a peace pact was signed between the British and Ashantis that recognized the Pra River as the border. With this treaty, either party was to respect the boundary and not cross into each other's territory. But this did not last. The Second Anglo-Ashanti War was very brief and occurred between 1863 and 1864, ending a 30-year peace. In 1863, an Ashanti force crossed the Pra River seeking a fugitive, Kwesi Gyena. British, African, and Indian troops responded, but the conflict ended inconclusively due to disease causing more casualties than combat, leading to a stalemate in 1864. The British governor requested more troops from England, but was denied as the British monarchy didn't see this as an attack on their territory and considered the attack on the Ashanti troops as needless. Join us again next time when we bring to you the Third and Fourth Anglo-Ashanti War. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until then, stay curious and stay informed.